Welcome to the House of Oddities, a repository of the unsettling and the freakish from all over the world, where every curated item has a dark past, shrouded in mystery, but offered up for your viewing pleasure. Beginning your journey into the peculiar on your left, we have the hand of a Himalayan Yeti. In 1912, on the slopes of Mount Everest, an expedition came across an undiscovered village. These villagers spoke of being terrorized by a monstrous beast that came in the night and killed men, women, and children. Vowing to put a stop to the creature's reign of terror, the expedition set out into the wintry blackness to find and kill the murderous brute. Only one man returned, driven mad and on the verge of death. He never spoke to anyone of what he saw, but he carried with him a severed hand covered in fur. The expedition was never heard from again, and who knows what one-handed horrors still await in the Himalayan night. Next, we have a jar of giant eyeballs floating in amniotic fluid. Residing in North Carolina in 1951, Mary Dupree was in her 6th month of pregnancy when her doctors noticed something amiss. Her belly had grown remarkably large in a very short period of time, and Mary had begun having the strangest feeling, like someone was watching her day and night. Ultrasound hadn't been perfected yet, so there was no way to know what was happening inside Mary. Things reached ridiculous proportions a month later, and the doctors decided to perform a surgery to remove the child from the mother to save her life. What they found horrified everyone. A child with 4 blind eyes, 2 on the front of his gigantic head, 2 on the back. The poor infant died a day later, and Mary made a full recovery. The sensation of being watched stopped after the surgery. Sometimes a child just wants to see his mother. Next in our display of the ghoulish and the ghastly are the 4 fingers of Edward Murrow. Murrow was a serial killer from Portland, Oregon in the 1930s, known in the local paper as the Hush Killer, because he raised a finger to his lips to silence his victims before extinguishing their fragile lives. His last victim, Margaret Jefferson, barely survived, only escaping by severing Murrow's fingers with a kitchen knife and crawling out a window. Following the trail of blood, police caught the killer a few blocks away, weakened and bleeding profusely. Returning to the scene of the crime, the 4 fingers had gone missing. For weeks afterwards, Margaret complained of hearing scratching sounds in the walls of her house, and soon became convinced that the fingers were out to get her, coming to finish Edward Murrow's terrible work. Margaret went mad in that house, and a few months later was institutionalized in a state mental hospital. 10 years later, the house had sold, and when the new occupants went to do some renovations to the kitchen, they found these 4 fingers perfectly preserved inside the wall. Continuing onwards, we have the tainted tinctures of J.B. Brown, including a bottle of ill-gotten sperm oil. In the late 1860s, Mr. Brown was an entrepreneur of questionable repute, assisted by his wife Alice, a nurse at the local VA hospital. After years of unsuccessfully peddling various snake oils to the unsuspecting, crow cough, nervous pills, and liver remedies, he and his wife became convinced they had found the ultimate tonic to preserve youth, a mixture of castor oil, a dash of black magic, and human semen. Alice used her position working the night shift in the coma ward at the hospital to milk her patients, providing JB with a perpetual supply of the highly valued seed. They marketed the tonic as being from a sperm whale, a clever play on words. They were arrested a year later when one night Alice was caught red-handed at work. Once authorities caught wind of their nefarious scheme and discovered the black altar in the home where they sanctified their vile concoction, they were sentenced to die by military firing squad in 1871. But you know what they say, easy come, easy go. In 1825, two missionaries, Anna and Charles Kemp, found themselves in the darkest jungles of Borneo, trying to convert the locals to the faith of the day with little success. One summer night under the fullest of moons, Anna was attacked while walking and bitten on the neck by a vampire bat. The next day, she was taken ill. Charles, with nowhere to turn and no modern medicine available, consulted the local witch doctor, who told him Anna was now afflicted with the curse of demon blood, and that Charles must leave her in his care. Charles would not listen and took Anna home, where she expired before dawn. A mournful Charles buried his beloved Anna the next day. That night, Charles heard an unexpected step outside his door. Investigating the sound, he was shocked to find Anna standing before him, pale as a ghost and covered in funerary dirt. She would not speak, so Charles rushed her inside, seating her at the table. As he turned to get her some tea, she attacked him, snarling like a beast possessed and tearing a chunk out of his neck with her teeth. Terrified, Charles shoved her away, and she stumbled over her chair, caroming wildly into the wall next to the fireplace. Lunging towards him again, feral and mindless, Charles searched for a means to defend himself. Pulling a decorative spear from his wall display and left with no choice, he plunged it through Anna's unbeating heart. Breathless with fear and terribly injured, Charles could already hear the voices, telling him to let go, calling for blood. And he could feel a building thirst that could only be sated by death. Not wanting to become a cursed terror and seeing no other way, Charles shot himself, ending his life right before midnight. The witch doctor came upon the scene the next day and ordered their heads removed and their bodies burned. He then shrank their heads and hanged them on his hut door as a reminder to others: never walk alone at midnight. Next is the body of the boy king of Marrakesh, Osman the Black. The diminutive tyrant ruled over his desert kingdom with an iron fist for 5 dark years in the 1720s. Osman's mind was twisted by his closest advisor, the court wizard Adil. People whispered he was a necromancer, steeped in the black arts, and that he held a devil captive in his chambers below the palace. People also whispered that Adil had replaced Osman with an evil changeling, and that Osman was no longer human at all. As Adil's power grew, Osman spiraled into madness. One day in court, those gathered were horrified to see Osman had plucked out his own eye and replaced it with the eye of a cat, so he could better see in the darkness. On the next day, Osman had removed his teeth and replaced them with his fingernails, stating that he no longer needed food and that his mouth was the touch of God. Unable to take it any longer, the people rose up, razed the palace, killed Adil, and put an end to the reign of Osman the Black. Not even content with having him dead, they gave his body to a Bedouin caravan so that he would be forever doomed to travel the earth and never again have a home. Pulling into Boston Harbor in 1824, a lone fisherman, one Captain Dodge, was recounting his adventures in a tavern over one too many Applejacks. Up the coast, he had found a community of mermaids living in peace beneath the waves. They were curious and friendly and tried to communicate with him, but a storm blew in and the captain left the area, returning to safe harbor. The tavern's patrons called him an addled fool, but Captain Dodge swore he would prove them wrong. The next day, he returned to the area and once again saw the mermaids in the surf. Recognizing him, the merfolk brought him gifts, shells and pearls from the ocean's depths. But this was not enough for the sullen captain. When the mermaids began to return to their underwater abode, he cast a net into the waves and managed to snag one of the mermaids' children. The foolish captain pulled the creature from the water and took it to his cabin, where it soon fell ill and died. Raising anchor, he swiftly returned to Boston, intent on proving his naysayers wrong. As the sun set that day, his peers in the tavern remarked at his absence. Captain Dodge always made it back to port and never missed a pint in the evening. At sunrise the following day, his boat was found outside the harbor, listless and untended. The startled fisherman found old Captain Dodge hanging from his mast by seaweed, his mouth stuffed with seashells and pearls. and with all its guts spilled out on the deck below. There was no sign of anyone else on board. Searching the captain's cabin, the locals found the dead body of the tiny mermaid you see before you. Coastal mothers still tell the tale of old Captain Dodge to scare their children into behaving. If you hear a baby crying in the waves, run away, or it will soon be followed by the clicking of shells and pearls as the ghost of Captain Dodge comes for you. Second to last on our tour of the delectably diabolical, we have a skull belonging to the feral Amazonian ape boy. First encountered by the Western world in 1947, a biologist told the wild tale of a child, part ape, part human, that was seen stealing chickens from a coop near their camp in the Brazilian basin. More than just an uncivilized boy roaming the jungle, he seemed misshapen and disproportionate, much more akin to our ape-like ancestors than any modern human should be. A fledgling circus entrepreneur named D.W. Bailey, upon hearing this tale, became determined to add this unique entity to his menagerie and, a year later, set out into the darkest heart of the jungle to find him. Tracking the boy down and cornering him in a small cave, Bailey successfully captured the creature and brought him back to tour the country, chained up in a cage and shown like an animal. But the ape boy, though possessing neither language skills nor a civilized demeanor, was quite clever. One night he escaped his circus prison and snuck into D.W. Bailey's tent and proceeded to kill the showman. Police reports say Bailey was eaten alive. A search ensued, and ultimately the ape boy, covered in blood and gore, was shot dead and then returned to the circus, where he has stayed to this very day. In 1962, a meteor lit up the New Mexico sky and came crashing to the earth in a farmer's field just outside of Alamogordo. The next morning, the crater was discovered by young Mikey Adams, a smoldering trough gouged into the field. At the bottom, the boy found what was left of a space rock, almost 2 feet wide and cracked down the middle, spilling forth a viscous pink goo that almost seemed to glow with a life of its own. Ever curious, Mikey stuck a finger into the mass, but realizing it was far too hot to handle, left it to cool. Returning that afternoon, he was shocked to discover that the strange space substance was gone. That night, Mikey was awakened by a strange sound in his dark room, a slithery, sloshy sound. Quickly turning on the lamp on his nightstand, he was horrified to see an exact replica of himself standing at the foot of his bed. Only he could hear the skin move, hear it flow and change. Aghast, Mikey leapt from his bed and ran from his room, screaming down the hallway. His father came up the stairs with shotgun in hand, expecting an intruder. Mikey cried that there was a monster in his room and it looked just like him. Mikey's father entered the room and, seeing the liquid imposter, immediately opened fire. The still-forming creature burst into a puddle of the alien fluid. Scientists from the nearby military base came and carefully gathered the liquid remains, and no one knows what became of it. However, I would not recommend opening the jar. You might just hear strange slithery sounds at the foot of your bed, waiting in the darkness. And so ends our tour of the fantastical, the fearsome, and the ill-fated. If we can learn anything from these grisly remains found in the darkest corners of the world, it's that more exists than our knowledge allows for, and much more frequently than we imagined. You can tell yourself that you're safe, merely observing the strange, barely venturing into the terrors that hide in the night. But ask yourself, are we really any different from them? Who are the real oddities here?